Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Daily IoT. On today's episode, I want to talk about abstractions. And this is a sort of a late night filming. I've been working on the project now for a couple of hours, and just something that's sort of falling out of this product journey that I'm on is the way that I'm approaching writing code. And when I talk about abstractions, I'm not talking specifically about things like inheritance and polymorphism that you would expect in a computer science manner of speaking, although that is part of what I'm talking about. But it's this idea of abstracting away the code that you're writing to decouple it from the platform that you're working on. And so right now, as we've been going through this, I've been planning to use a particle photon, at least as the first part of this hockey puck product project. However, I'm trying to think about this and be more thoughtful of, this isn't just a maker project where I can bust it out on the photon. I've already done that. I have a completely working hockey puck project here that I completed like a couple of months ago. To make it a product, I'm trying to approach this in a way that is platform agnostic and doing that in my code. And so the entire project is written in C++, but what I want to accomplish, what I'm trying to be thoughtful about through this is, if Particle goes out of business tomorrow or some other thing comes out that's smaller and cheaper and does Wi-Fi or has some other connection thing, I don't want to be married to the particle photon and have my code full of dependencies. And so when I talk about creating levels of abstraction, I'm trying to write all of the components of this in such a way that with very little effort, I could switch platforms and not skip a beat. And I feel like that's part of the forethought that you need to put into making a product where this is why things in Kickstarter I feel like fail. Some part of your plan falls through and then you were woefully dependent on that and can't make that switch. And so as an example, I've got this screen that's connected to the photon, and to connect to that I need things like SPI and GPIO to talk to on the various lines. And I talked about before how I was creating an abstraction layer around that. But if my screen code was full of particle specific ways of talking over SPI and accessing GPIO, if I need to switch platforms, I have to go in and all that code and change it, and it's probably peppered through all of that. Whereas if I have a nice abstraction around it, I have, in the case that I've been working here, I have this thing called the particle hardware abstraction layer, which inherits from my base hardware abstraction layer, so that there's just one file that has the particle specifics of doing things like SPI and GPIO. And so if I need to switch, all I have to do is create another subclass of my base in hardware abstraction layer, and I should be ready to go. All the other code doesn't need to be touched. And so a good test for that is if you're writing something like screen code, or in the case of like the HTTP client that we've been working on, if there are specifics to the platform, it's too tightly coupled. And now that works, right? I could go in, and if I wanted to switch to a Raspberry Pi, I just go into those spots and I change it to be Raspberry Pi-ish instead of Particle. But that gets, messy. And so it's harder. You want those clean breaks. And so that's just something that I'm trying to be thoughtful about as I'm going through and writing all of the code for this project. Trying to do it in such a way that everything is decoupled from the platform itself, and that the platform specifics are contained in a small enough module that I can just write another one of those if I ever need to hop platforms. And so just something that I wanted to share that I feel like I've always known about. That's just good computer science programming practice, is to create clean abstractions. But when you do maker projects for such a long time, you lose sight of that, because it's just, what do I need to do on this platform to get it working? And so taking that product mentality of what I think is at least a smart approach is to not take those dependencies and write your code in such a way that it really is separated well and has clean breaks, so that you are not married to any particular platform and would have a hard time switching. And so that's the thought of the day on the product journey here. Question of the day, nothing to do with this whatsoever. I actually tried to think of one before I started, and I couldn't think of a relevant one that ties into the topic of the day. So we're gonna go completely switching gears and say, question of the day, Star Wars or Star Trek? Let me know down in the comments. I appreciate everybody watching Daily IoT, the show where together we're learning how to make the Internet of Things one day at a time.